Hey everyone, and welcome to another Game Explained discussion. I'm your host, Derek Bittner, and I'm joined today by Steve Bowling as we give our predictions for Sony's upcoming PlayStation 5 showcase on September 16th. That's airing at 1 p.m. Pacific time. So yeah, kind of out of nowhere, especially with this being revealed on a Saturday, but we do know that it is going to be around 40 minutes long and will feature updates on the latest titles from Worldwide Studios and their partners. So they don't say anything else about what they're showing. But that does leave a lot of interpretation for what we might see, because they're not saying, well, we're not going to show this and we're not going to show this. It's just saying what they will show, which, I guess the big question is, Steve, do you think we're going to get a release date and price at this point?
Oh, absolutely. I think we have to. I mean, we already have the info for the Xbox, and one look at Twitter says that people are really hungry for this info, and if they're going to release even at any time between now and December, you have to get that info out.
People aren't going to pre-order until they know the price. I mean, they got the diehard fans out there, but beyond that, no. I do not want to even consider taking a pre-order, potentially even unless I know how much I'm spending. This is, people have to watch their budgets at this point, so Sony has to kind of recognize that, and now that Xbox has it out, I think it behooves Sony to put it out there as well. Although they might end up, this is probably the one volley that they're likely not going to win. It seems to me there's no way the PS5 is going to be at the same price or cheaper than Xbox at this point. I have a feeling we're going to hit that $600 price point for the PS5.
Wow. I just don't know that Sony could pull that off. I mean, could they try? Yeah. But yeah. I'm curious as to whether they have that PS3 level arrogance about them to do another $600 console. So I'm thinking that they're going to match the Series X, that we're going to get a $499 box, and I think that's because they kind of remember how badly they were the butt of a lot of jokes in the PS3 era. Do I think they'll be selling at a loss? Absolutely. But I think they're going to come in at $500 to remain competitive with Microsoft, especially since the Series S is also out there for $300. So it kind of widens that price gap to an untenable degree for a lot of people. Yeah,
I can't see it going beyond 600, and I can't see it going below 500. So it's definitely within that range. It's likely going to be 500 if anything. But for whatever reason, my gut feeling was 600, or it might have been 600 up to this point, and Sony was just waiting to see what Microsoft was going to do, and okay, 500, we got to do 500, and just go from there.
Right, and it's worth noting that Sony has a track record of undercutting their competitors on price, or, at least taking a loss to match them. The original PlayStation announcement was literally just somebody walking up to a podium saying $299 and walking away, which was, a huge deal because it was, I think, $100 less or $50 less than the Sega Saturn at that point. So I kind of expect, I'm with you in that I think that there may have been an internal plan for it to be $600, and they were thinking that Microsoft was going to pull the trigger on the same price, and it seems pretty obvious to even the casual observer that Microsoft and Sony have kind of been locked in this game of, who's going to blink first, and Microsoft ultimately was forced into it. So I think that there's a high likelihood that it was going to retail higher, or the plan was for it to retail higher, and now Sony has had to kind of shift those plans. I wouldn't be surprised if we saw a $500 box, but I also wouldn't be surprised if the original plan was for it to be $600.
Now, for their disc driveless version, I forget if they have a specific name for it, but they do have two versions like the Xbox Series S and X. Are they going to go for that $300 as well, or are they going to go for $400?
I think this is going to be $400. I think a $200 difference is way, way, way too much. I mean, that makes... So a lot of folks on Twitter have been floating the idea that the price difference will be $50, and I've long been saying that I think that is too little of a difference in price makes it negligible, and one model will get ignored in favor of the other, because people will just be in the store looking for a PS5 and go, oh well, the difference is $50, so I'll get the disc model because it's only $50 more. Whereas I think if you went the other way and you dramatically slashed the price of the digital model, nobody would pick up the disc model because they'd say, what, I'm going to pay $200 for a Blu-ray drive?
Yeah.
So I think we're going to see $100 difference. It's kind of that consumer sweet spot in the mindset where it's like, okay, there's a tangible difference, and people will make decisions based on, how much 100 is worth to them, really. So I think that would kind of guarantee a good split between the purchases of those. It would be the only price difference at which it would make sense in my mind for two to exist in the first place.
Because I believe that the disk driveless model, that is the only difference. It's still as powerful as the normal PS5, correct? Or am I wrong on that?
You're absolutely right. Yeah,
Okay.
it's the exact same console, just without a disk drive attached. I mean, same SSD size, same everything. So.
Yeah, which does create a definite difference, because the Series S is less powerful than the Series X. So there is that whole thing. But maybe that's why, I mean, Microsoft is getting competitive with the Switch by going to $300. People are looking at the Switch and they're looking at this next gen console, playing these amazing, good looking games that are clearly better looking than the Switch, even though, Switch has good art direction with a lot of their games, but still there's that. And it makes it a little bit more attractive, I'd say. So it's going to be interesting with those price points. We're going to have a console at $300, $400, and $500, at least presumably.
Yeah, I agree with that. I'm curious to see how things shape up. Yeah, the Series S, I mean, just thinking that a next-gen console is the same price as, the 4-year-old Nintendo Switch is a little baffling, which makes me wonder what Nintendo has loaded for next year, but that's a whole other discussion video. But yeah, I think that I just can't see this announcement price-wise going a different direction than this, but I'd be happy to be wrong. As long as being wrong means that prices are lower somehow.
Yeah.
But like you said, Derek, I just can't imagine Sony coming in at a price point under $500 for the fully featured model, if you will. And the digital model, again, I just can't see a delta of less than or more than $100. But again, a $50 difference would be great too. I wouldn't be upset, but I also think, given the nature of the business you and I work in, I don't think there's a chance that I'm getting the digital model. No,
I definitely would go for the disc one, just because I do still enjoy collecting them. It feels nice to have them always on hand,
Yeah, I mean, I have a handful of PS4 games that are the ones that I would deem special. The ones that I think that 10 years from now I'm likely to still want to boot them up and play them, and don't want to rely on PSN still having them.
Yeah, exactly. So going beyond the price, do you think they'll show anything other than games? Are we going to get to see maybe the UI? Are we going to get to see, other aspects of the PlayStation 5 that they have not shown up to this point? Or are they going to keep it games and potentially price and date? Just so Sony hasn't really jumped out in front of Xbox as far as showing things off.
Right. I think we are going to see the UI. Because again, Sony's doing this smart thing where they're kind of underlining how next gen the PS5 is, how it's an actual generational leap, and they're trying to use that as like a selling point against Microsoft, where Microsoft is taking this kind of iterative approach to the Xbox, saying like, hey, if you don't want to jump in with both feet, we still support backwards compatibility. This is just more of the same stuff you love from one into this generation, down to the dashboard. Like the Series X runs the same dashboard the One X does.
Oh, okay.
So for Sony, this is a big chance to say like, hey, look, we're super different. Our controller's different, our hardware's different, even our UI is different, and Sony fans will eat it up. They love stuff like this. I love stuff like this. I like seeing, what makes these new consoles new, so to speak. But conversely, on the other side of it, being more of a critic or a cynic even, I can't imagine there's a ton of launch games. I can't imagine that Sony has a bunch of stuff ready to go for the PS5 launch. I think we'll get a handful of really good games at launch. And I think to kind of make it seem like there's more to show, we'll get a look at the console under the hood.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I like maybe 10 to 15 games at most. Hard to say. I'm not sure on that one. It can make sense unless we got a lot of ports that are up-res or something like that, or stuff that came out and it's available for both PS4 and PS5, for example. That makes sense to a certain degree. But yeah, I feel like I'm agreeing with you in most cases. Like, I don't know if they'll actually show the UI and whatnot, but it is a way to sort of buff things out and have this sort of exciting, more techie thing to show off that they can. That's a little bit more feasible. Like when they were going over, like, this is what it's capable of, here's its things, my eyes glazed over. I can't really stay interested in that sort of thing. But when, like, hey, here's the main screen, here's the startup, here's we're going to demonstrate how fast it is from picking a game to starting it up because of the SSD. That stuff's kind of cool and interesting. And I guess I don't think they're going to fully lay out, like, okay, here's our entire launch lineup. I highly doubt we're going to get that at this presentation.
Yeah, that's a good question. I mean, assuming that the console launches in November, we're only 2 months out. So I actually kind of disagree on this one because I think they have to. Like, they have to tell us what games are coming for launch. Maybe not the full picture, but we have to know some of them. Just because if you want me to buy a PS5, what do you want me to buy with it? The other thing I think we're going to get, I don't think we're going to get pricing info just on the hardware. Sony was very keen to unveil like a slate of accessories with the PS5, like a remote, a camera, a charging dock, all this kind of stuff. I think it's not exciting stuff, but I think that they're going to lay out like what all the hardware costs. I'm really curious if we're going to see controller price creep with this generation. Because controllers have been steadily getting more expensive in the last 3 generations.
That's why I think I've only ever had one PS4 controller. I never bought a second one, mainly because there's not a lot of local.
They retail for $60.
Yeah, that's an entire game. I don't want to do that, so I'll take a pack in and just do with that. Especially because there's not really a lot of local local games on Sony.
Yeah,
anyway.
These days local games aren't really a big thing. Like the one game that I play the most, like in a couch co-op setting or in a couch setting, is Jackbox, and everyone uses their phone for that. So, yeah, I'm not. I wouldn't be surprised though if we see a $70 controller because they're making a big deal about how much they've improved with the DualSense, like the haptic feedback and the triggers and stuff like that. And Sony does have a case to make for it being more expensive than a DualShock 4. That being said, I don't want it to be.
No.
But I think we're going to see... I mean, Joy-Cons are $80. I believe a Switch Pro controller is $70. I'm fairly certain that's standard
70.
retail price.
I can't quite remember, but yeah, it's up there.
Yeah, but I mean, Nintendo's been creeping up the standard price of controllers as well. So I think that we'll see at least a $70 controller, if not more. But I think they're going to give us pricing info for all the stuff because people at this point are going to want to be budgeting out, like, how much money do I need to get everything I want when the PS5 comes out? And I think that's going to be interesting. I think we'll get pre-order availability, but I do think game-wise, they're going to focus on launch games. I think that's what makes sense at this point. Even Microsoft hasn't really been clear about what the hell we can pick up when the Series X comes out for games. I don't know what games will be available. Third parties have been helping us fill in the blanks, like Ubisoft at their Forward event let us know that Assassin's Creed is a launch title for the new Xbox, and I presume for the PlayStation as well. Watch Dogs will be available at launch. Immortals Phoenix Rising comes out a month after launch, like in December. When it launches, it'll launch on next gen as well. So I think if Sony wants to kind of fill in the blanks for us, I feel like this is a great time to do it. Let us know what games are coming, but I agree that we'll still leave pretty confused.
Yeah, there's absolutely going to be more questions after this is done, but at least some of the gaps will be filled at that point. But yeah, do you think we'll see any new games, or do you think it's going to be mostly updates and maybe a better look at what these launch games are going to be like? Like, could we see a segment on, hey, here's how Spider-Man Miles Morales plays? Because we really don't know that.
Yeah, so I think we're going to get updates on the big launch window games. So I think that Spider-Man, Ratchet and Clank, we might see new stuff from. Because I think Ratchet and Clank, it will probably be like a launch window-ish kind of game.
I think they've said that, yeah.
Yeah, so I think like within the first 3 to 4 months, Ratchet and Clank will come out. So, and I think Sony has to know that is the game most fans are most excited for. Because that is the only game that I look at and think, wow, that is a next-gen showcase. Like, you can't do that on anything else. Yeah. And I think that's going to be the game that proves to people that the PS5 is worth their money, worth whatever Sony's asking for it. Because I like Spider-Man. I am super hyped for Miles Morales. Mm-hmm. But it does nothing. I can't imagine it doing anything that sells me on next-gen hardware, that tells me like, oh, wow, this had to be on PlayStation 5. Mm-hmm. Whereas I look at Ratchet and Clank, and the value proposition is visible from 2 seconds into that trailer. When you see him just jump through a rift, and he's in a whole new place, and there's no stutter, no lag, no nothing, that is what these SSDs are for. Mm-hmm.
It is amazingly impressive. Like, I'm already a Ratchet and Clank fan, but show me that stuff, have a new game for the first time in how long, and it looked like that. I'm sorry, that sold me on the PlayStation 5, and hopefully it's a decent price so it doesn't, bankrupt me, but that game makes me want to have a PlayStation 5.
Yeah. I mean, and that's a total normal reaction. I think that so I think that they are going to deliver updates on these games. They have to. I think that some of them will be missing, games that we know are way further off in the distance. Like, I don't expect to see more of Horizon at this thing, because it's not going to influence a purchase decision in the next 60 days. But I think Ratchet and Clank, I think Spider-Man, I think we will see some new stuff, but I'm going to go on record as saying none of it will be exciting. I think it's going to be like sizzle reel with here's some cross-gen stuff that you didn't know about. Yeah. And I think that's what we'll get, and that'll kind of be the padding. But I think, tentpole games will basically be Spider-Man and Ratchet, since we know those are coming soon, and they're both games that kind of energize, the fan base. I do think we'll see some third-party stuff that people have mostly assumed is coming and just hasn't been outright confirmed yet. Like, I think we'll see the Ubisoft stuff, basically.
Yeah, I could see us seeing that. Maybe we'll get a release date for Resident Evil Village.
Yeah, that would be really cool. Mm-hmm. I mean, again, I'm sitting here thinking about 2021 like it's so far away, but thank God this year's almost over.
Seriously.
So yeah, we may see some early 2021 stuff, and by early I mean like up to March, 6 months from now, because I think that would make sense too. But yeah, I think the focus is going to be on stuff coming at or really near launch, just to influence that purchase decision, especially with the holidays being right after this thing comes out, presumably. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's definitely launching in November. It wouldn't surprise me, like, Microsoft claimed November 10th. This is probably November 17th, if I had to guess.
Yeah, I had put on Twitter that I thought that the date was November 3rd, and a couple people helpfully pointed out to me, like, you really think they're going to drop it on Election Day? And I
didn't even think about that. Jeez.
Yeah, I mean, but the thing is, so last generation, or technically this generation, Sony launched exactly 1 week before Microsoft. And I have to say, I'm still kind of a fan of the strategy. I think that if you've got undecided gamers or undecided parents. Who knows, right? Because you're launching close to the holidays. Being first out the gate is valuable. It has some power to it, because if somebody just goes, oh man, I'm going to get the new console. Oh, this one's available now. Like, you know, and I got to rush to get it or whatever. Then you've taken that $500 out of that person's pocket, and that's $500 that they may not be able to spare for a different console. But yeah, I don't know. I think November 17th is also like a super solid prediction. I think whatever it is, if Sony is not, let me put it this way, if Sony is not launching election week, which is definitely, I would give that a high likelihood. If Sony is not launching election week, then they're definitely the 17th. I would say 100% if they don't launch the week before the Xbox, that it is to the day 1 week after.
How insane would it be if Sony decided to launch it the same day as Xbox?
Oh man, I would honestly, and to be clear to our viewers, I don't know if we'll get review units for either of these. There's definitely no such thing as a guarantee here. I hope we do. But even if we do, I would still go down to GameStop to see what kind of chaos ensues. Like, I would want to see. I mean, I already just feel bad for them knowing that there are two consoles launching presumably within 7 days of each other. I remember this generation being in the lines to pick mine up, you know, and I hated as a consumer getting up one night, going to GameStop, 7 days later, getting up the next night, going back to GameStop. I was like, I don't have the energy for this, and I'm much older now, so I can't imagine being those folks at the front lines, especially during COVID, you know, having to deal with that. So I hope that Sony is kind and doesn't just latch onto the same day.
Yeah, that would be nice. It does seem like a kind of a bad move. So we'll see what actually happens. But yeah, that's the funny thing about this. It's hard to predict exactly what we're going to get as far as games, but I do think I feel like this presentation is going to be more focused on, you know, launch window games. Here's what the UI is, and end off with price and date.
Yeah, I feel like at this point, you kind of have to take the wraps off. You have to. This is like the last big push to generate massive hype. I mean, there's still a high probability of an October event, but I think that's going to be the one that gets into the minutia of the games. Yeah. Like if it happens, like I think that there's still room for an event between here and launch to really do just a huge deep dive on the games that are coming out with the console. So I think this is kind of like here's your price, here's your pre-order details, here's a couple, you know, like a more in-depth look at some of the big, you know, first-party launch games coming, and here's, you know, what you're going to pay for everything. So yeah, I think that this is, I'm really excited for this event. Like, I really want this to be what you and I have been talking about.
Yeah, it'd be nice. And if it is just more games, that's fine. I'm always up for looking at games and maybe getting me excited about, you know, other stuff. There's a lot of, Sony's had a pretty good track record of showing games I'm interested in for these PS5 showcases. So I'm curious what else they might have to show, if anything. But I'm hoping we'll get, for the most part, trailers showing off a little bit more of these games with release dates, if they are launch window games. Something to that effect. I think it's time for more concrete details.
Yeah, I mean, Sony has been really good about showing actual gameplay, which is really nice. I can't believe in 2020 we're having to say, please show us games being played. But I do think, like you said, you know, we still haven't seen any gameplay of Miles Morales. So I would really like to see that game actually running. You know, and I'd love to see more of as much Ratchet and Clank as you can give me between now and when it comes out. And I would love to see some third-party stuff actually running on the PS5. So, yeah, I think that, you know, I don't think that there's a snowball's chance in hell that they have 50 minutes worth of gameplay to show us. But I'd be very happily surprised if this was if there was a lot of new games here for them to show.
Yeah, I think so. But Yeah, usually these end up longer than the actual prediction, the actual events, but I'm pretty much tapped out. I'm not sure exactly what else we can see, and I think it's a lot of clarifications on knowns at this point, so I think that's why I don't have a ton of predictions on this one.
Yeah, I mean, I think that the big takeaways from this are just going to be price and release date. I think that's what everyone wants to hear right now, and I'd be shocked if we didn't get it. So my big prediction is we're gonna find out all the stuff everyone assumes we're gonna find out.
How brave of you. All right, well, I think that covers it for our PlayStation 5 Showcase predictions discussion, so thank you for watching, and if you liked this video, be sure to like us on Facebook and Twitter at GameXplain, and of course be sure to subscribe to GameXplain for more on the PlayStation 5, including likely a reaction stream of this showcase, and other things gaming as well. Until next time, bye.